So this is the workshop, a webinar on what are you still carrying, where you learn to spot your overfunctioning, shift the load, and leave with the two ready-to-use moves without having to overhaul your entire curriculum. So I'd like to bring you here. Close your tabs if you have them open. I know you don't because you're not feeling well, so you're kind of lying around. But I'd really like you to think of this as kind of your thought sanctuary, a place to come for an hour and think about your daily practice in your classroom. If you're still in the classroom, if you're supervising teams of teachers, whatever your position is. So we're going to start with something a bit light. Pick the dog that matches your teacher mood right now. Maybe you're calm and
No,
collected, like number 3. Maybe you're
no,
hanging
I
on
think
by a
number
thread.
two.
Which one
Number
are
two.
you? Number
Number
2?
two. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if we're honest, we're probably somewhere in between. Like
Yeah.
for me, sometimes I'm all of these in one day, and sometimes I'm these
Yeah.
in one class. And my dog Stevie is in there as well. So you can see she's number
Yeah.
4.
Oh, cute.
Absolutely. Okay. The reason why I start here is because these faces really tell a bigger story. Our jobs aren't just about planning, delivering lessons, marking. It's about the energy that it takes to keep everything running. And when our students don't step in, that energy comes all from us. So tonight's session is really a thinking, reflective space, not just a webinar or workshop. You're bringing the expertise of your own practice, and my role is to give you a few tools and approaches that fit your context, whether you're leading from the classroom or from a place of leadership, leading teacher teams. Right now, most of us feel like students rely on us for everything. It feels a bit heavy, like we're carrying the whole classroom. We're doing the thinking, the deciding, and the reminding. In this picture, you see me actually doing the entertaining. So they wait while we lead, and sometimes that can be really exhausting. Um,
Yeah.
but we're kind of thinking about what would happen if that shifted. What if they stepped up? And what if we had a structure that supported them to do that? And that's exactly what we're covering today. Less push, more ownership, less chasing, more clarity. And we're teaching in a way that aligns more carefully with our own values. So if you stick with me till the end of the hour, here's what you're going to get: a fresh way to see student ownership, a clearer picture of, oops, excuse me. Sorry, my dog. That's Stevie going off.
Oh, that's okay.
Let's just pause for a second. Hold on. Sorry about that. And hello, welcome. Welcome to this workshop if you're just joining us. So we're just going over what we're going to be covering today or this evening. So a fresh way to see student ownership, a clearer picture of what's making your teaching heavier and where students might be ready to step up. And then 2 simple strategies that you can try immediately that are going to shift the load back to your students without having to redo your lessons, your entire curriculum. So that's what we're going over today. And welcome. If you want to come off mute, feel free. If you want to come off camera, on camera, it doesn't matter. Really what's comfortable for you. And if you need to ask a question, you can do that at any time in the chat, or you can come off mute and just ask. Okay, so feel free to do that at any time. All right, who am I? I'm MA Skidmore. I am a teaching and learning coach. I'm also a classroom teacher and a learning partner for school leaders. I teach in the secondary. I've taught in middle school as well throughout my career. I teach language and literature as well as media and communications. That's what my load is this year. I'm also a podcast co-host with my friend and colleague Jacob. We host the International Teacher Staff Room, where we offer kind of an advice line for teachers for different times in the year. So if you want to listen to that or even come on our show, right into our show, it's a really fun way to support teachers. I'm also a tech nerd, so I love anything ed tech. I'm a ped tech specialist, so how to use tech tools to support good pedagogy. And in my private practice in Teach Spark, my work is to help teachers build classrooms that run on student energy. Sorry, yeah, student energy, student ownership, and student energy rather than teacher energy. So, how did I start doing this work? How did I go from classroom teacher, department head, and all of these roles inside the school to doing this work with other teachers? I was, this teacher that gave everything. I was scaffolding, I was differentiating, then I was doing universal design for learning, breaking things down for my students. In fact, my LMS was filled with documents, videos, worksheets, all sorts of things, all created by me. I was doing it all. It's because I wanted to support my students. I wanted them to succeed and feel prepared. And I thought that if I just gave more, they would engage more. But that didn't actually happen. They didn't end up stepping up. And over time, over years of that, I started to feel disappointed. Then I started to feel angry. And I really gained, I was starting to feel resentful towards them and really, really drained. I took that as a warning. This was telling me either I needed to get out of the profession or I needed to do something different. And that's really hard for teachers when you get to that point because we're drawn to this work, as a profession rather than a job. But through a lot of reflection, a lot of work with mentors and some help from coaches and other colleagues, I started to realize that the only variable in the entire scenario that I had complete 100% control over was me. So I decided I need to do something different. I need to make this work for them and for me. So that's what I started to do. My colleague and I can't remember the exact moment, but I remember specifically a project that my colleague and I designed. It was a kind of a project-based learning. It was a reading partnership project where students were working together to analyze and explore a novel on their own. There was no direct instruction involved in this project, and we purposely built it and built the skills so that students had to lead the activities. We were really noticing that we needed to step back and let them take control. And so we tightly engineered that for it. And then we stepped back. We literally stood in front of the room while they were working, resisting the urge to jump in. This was uncomfortable, awkward, and it felt very weird. At one point, I was really feeling like I needed to jump in, and I was like, "Oh, I need to go and tell them about this really important thing in the book. I don't know if they're going to get it." And my colleague looked at me. She's like, "Don't you dare. That's the whole point of this." So we waited, kind of feeling a bit useless. Well, the students were stumbling, fumbling. They didn't get it right the first time. They didn't get it right all the time, but over time they figured it out. And they started to do things that I had assumed they couldn't do. An example of that is some of my more higher performing students, they were actually spreading their wings and doing things that maybe my tight control and my over engineering things, overdoing, made them unable to go to where they needed to go. And then some of my more quiet students found their voice in that space once I stepped back. Watching them own that experience was electric. And my colleague Sophie and I just stood there kind of speechless, like this is actually working. We were so excited. We did feel a bit useless, but it was a good kind of useless. But coming from the classroom, that projects like that, as powerful as they are not sustainable. You cannot rebuild your whole course around them. So I started to think about ways I could implement small strategies and embed those into my daily practice. I was trying to shift the work from me to them, the doing, the thinking, and the deciding. I started to call this the shift. And I've been chasing that shift ever since for myself in my own classroom and now for the teachers that I work with, teachers just like you. It's not about motivating students, it's about sharing the responsibility for learning. And that shift is the heartbeat of the work that I do with teachers every day. So I'm happy to share this with you, this work that's so important and I know makes a big difference in the lives of my students and in the lives of teachers. Let's be real, this kind of an approach is not for everyone. So here's how to know if you're in the right place. This webinar is for you if you're tired of carrying all the responsibility for learning, if you want students to think, engage, take ownership without ditching your entire unit plans, your lesson plans, this is the right place for you. If you're open to trying small strategic shifts that work long term, you're in the right place. Welcome, Marie. Nice to see you. If let me just pause there. I'm just going over if you're in the right place for the webinar. If you have questions, come off mute and go ahead and ask, or you can drop stuff in the chat. If you want a structured way to make ownership work, even in exam-driven courses, IG, IB, AP, whatever it is, this is the right thing for you. So if you see yourself here, you're in the right place. But this webinar is not for you if you're looking for a quick fix, something that will happen without you having to make any changes to your teaching. If you believe that students can't take responsibility, and that's just how it is, that's kids these days, they can't do it, you're in the wrong place. If you aren't willing to let go of some of the control of your classroom to help your students grow, you are not in the right place. And I know that's not for everyone. Not everyone can do that, right? So let's just do a little quick check for the people who are here. Drop the word shift in the chat if you're ready to start shifting with me today. Now I have to get to the chat. Let me see if I can find that chat. Okay, perfect. Yay, you're with me. Woohoo. Thank you. Priyambada's with me. Okay, thank you, Marie. And Marie and others who are coming in a little bit after, I'll make the recording available so you can go back and catch the beginning piece. Okay. Perfect. Yay, let's go. All right. I want to introduce you to the big lens that we're going to be using in this work. It's a guide that I created called the Student Ownership Guide. This is not a checklist, it's a way of seeing. You will already be familiar with these terms. In fact, you're probably already doing most of this. And while it may seem obvious to you at first, it's not, it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy to implement. Most of us haven't been given the space or the time, or maybe even the language to name what's really going on when our students disengage from our lessons. And we probably haven't had the chance to step back and see how these things all fit together. And that's what this guide is going to give you. It's a bigger picture that you can keep coming back to as you plan and reflect and build ownership into your classroom. There are 4 key elements that lead to increased student ownership. And today I'm going to be zooming in on just 2 of them, engagement and self-regulation, because that's what's essential to our work today. I'll talk to you quickly about the other 2 so that you see the full picture, but really our focus is on the 2. We don't have time to go into all 4 in depth. If you do want all 4 in depth, I can give you that guide. You just have to reach out to me, send me an email or drop me a DM in LinkedIn and I can get that for you. I'm going to use the metaphor of a bike ride because I'm a lit teacher and I live my whole life in metaphor. And if you can think of all the parts of a bike ride that you need, of course, you need the bike. So that's kind of like our curriculum. It's solid. Some of them are flashy, some of them are more basic, but that is the base, right? And in order to do this bike ride, you need to be balanced on your bike. You need to have enough fuel to keep moving. You need to be in the right gear and you need to keep pedaling. Each one of these matters to having a good bike ride. And if without them or if they're out of balance, then you're not going to be moving forward as you might do. The two elements of student ownership that are most important are engagement and self-regulation. So we'll start with engagement. This is like the balance on the bike. Without this balance, your bike tips over. In learning, students need to feel connected to the task at the moment. They need to be interested, focused, actively involved, otherwise they stall out. This engagement comes from feeling seen and heard, that their voices matter in your classroom, that they're making micro choices, small decisions that will increase their buy-in to your lessons. And they're actively doing something, not just sitting and listening, but they're thinking, deciding, talking, all right? And engagement involves having immediate purpose. They know why what they're doing right now matters and what they're working for in this activity. I want to pause on engagement for a minute because I've been observing something in the educational sphere. I've seen it on LinkedIn. I've seen it in the literature research, and I've seen it in the way teachers are talking to me about how engagement is addressed in their school settings. And we often see that engagement is used in a supervisory sense. So teachers will tell me, I had someone come in to observe my class, and they said that my students were not all engaged in the activity, right? That's compliance. That's getting things done. If students are actually doing it themselves, balancing that ride themselves, the thinking, contributing, making choices that move the learning forward, that's the kind of engagement that we're talking about. Not did they do the thing that you told them to do, that you asked them to do. That is not the engagement that I'm chasing. It's not the engagement that is student led, right? The second piece of this is self-regulation. And I akin that to the pedaling of a bike ride. No matter how well the bike is built, no matter what model you have, if the rider doesn't pedal, they're not going to move forward. They will fall. Likewise, in learning, if students are not managing their focus, their effort, and their persistence, that learning is going to stall. Self-regulation shows up in our classrooms when students are setting goals, tracking progress, managing their time, their emotions. It's when they're reflecting and adjusting, like what worked, what didn't, what should I do next? And just like cycling, it takes practice and it takes some endurance. Our role as teachers is to model those strategies and build routines so that they can carry that motion forward even when their motivation dips or the tasks become harder. We can do this through things like teaching them time management, how to do self-talk. Where am I? Where am I going? Maybe even making checklists for them or showing them how to create visual organizers. Self-regulation is a piece that I see missing from so many classrooms, and it's not really our fault. It's because so many of us are tied to these very heavy, results-driven, exam-driven curricula that don't build this in. They don't have room in it, and it takes a lot of effort to build this into your practice. So it's no wonder that we're not seeing it more often, but we know that self-regulation is vital for learners. These are the two that I bring up and am focusing on because the strategies that I'm going to share with you are related directly to these two. Okay, the other two pieces to student ownership are rigor and motivation. I like to think of motivation as the fuel, and of course, the rigor, you need to be in the right gear of your cycle. So if we think of motivation as fuel, this is the quick boosts and steady nourishment that's going to keep a student going through a ride, whether it's difficult, easy, whatever. And this is made up of these four, the four elements of motivation are autonomy. So students feeling like they have that independence and choice, that they feel capable of doing the thing you're asking them to do, that if they put in the effort, they're going to get the results. If they don't believe that, they are not motivated. They're also motivated when they feel like they belong to a group. They're learning as a group in a community, and they feel motivated when they have meaningful work to do. This is beyond just the task at hand, but meaningful to them as people, as humans in the world. Rigor comes in if you think of this as, adjusting the challenge so that the effort stays steady. We will keep these in mind as we think about these next pieces. Excuse me, I don't know why that flipped, but we're not going to be focusing on those. I'd like you to just do a little bit of reflection here. When you picture your students, the students that you have this fall, or maybe the students from last term, think about which part of student ownership are they strong in? Which part are they still learning to kind of pedal through? And in the chat, I'd like you to drop which one of these four do your students need the very most right now? So drop that in the chat for me if you would. I'm always curious to see what people think. Which one does your students need most right now? Engagement, self-regulation, motivation, or rigor? Self-regulation is a curious one. It's one that I've really been exploring a lot lately, and I'm going to share with you some examples of that. But all of us have in different classroom contexts, and all of us are attracted to one of these more than the others, maybe because we're more familiar with it or more, we're like, oh, I really want to learn how to do that. So we've looked at engagement and self-regulation. Let's talk about what this actually looks like in a classroom setting. There are two key shifts that will make ownership a daily reality in your classroom. And these are they. The first one is shifting the thinking from teacher to student. I'm going to present both of these in the same format. So I'll talk about a common teacher mistake that I see when I'm coaching teachers, when I'm observing in their classrooms, why it happens, and the consequence of leaving it and not making any changes. So the first one is a very huge mindset shift for us, for the teacher. And a common teacher mistake that I see in this area is that teachers think that if they don't lead every single step, nothing's going to happen in their classroom. Or they think that if they don't keep things moving, then the learning is going to fall apart. We all fall victim to that, and we take that on for ourselves. It actually comes from a really good place. We care about student success so much that we want things to go smoothly. So we step in. We end up doing all the mental heavy lifting. So we explain things before they've even had time to think. We fill in the blank as soon as they hesitate, and we rescue them from the hard parts of learning. And the consequence of doing this over time is that your students get used to waiting for you. They stop trying to think for themselves, and they rely on us to tell them what to do. So we end up walking out of class completely drained. Well, it's a no wonder because we're carrying the cognitive load of 22 students plus every period. So I'm not surprised that we're not more exhausted than we actually are. So what do we do about that? Well, again, this shift is mostly or firstly about your mindset and thinking a different way about that. It's simple but super powerful. It's about tracking who's actually doing the work. So instead of assuming that your students aren't ready for ownership, I want you to start noticing, start observing. In your next lesson, try this, right? So you can do this tomorrow. Start counting. Who talks more in your lesson, you or your students? Who's asking the questions? Who's making the decisions? I like to keep a little sheet next to me, and I can just put a marker on it when it's me, when it's them, when it's me, when it's them, right? If it's mostly you at the end of that lesson, that's your signal. It's time to step back and let those students do some more of the thinking, deciding, and talking, even if it's awkward. And it will feel awkward for you at first, and it will be awkward for them because they're not used to that. You're looking for small moments where you can pass that back to them. So you're doing most of the talking. Where's a small moment you can pass it back to them, pass it back to them? The idea here is that you want them to feel the weight of the task. That's where the learning is going to happen, when they feel the weight stronger than you do. If you're looking for ways to respond, I've got ideas for that. In fact, I promised you all a in-class ownership check if you came live, and I will drop that to you at the end of session. And this is a tool that you can use in your classroom to observe and then respond immediately when you see it. So you see someone, you're doing most of the talking, you notice it. What are you going to do to flip that back to the students? You need something easy that you don't have to plan for, that's just sitting right there and you can just do it right there. So I will give you that on the end of the session. So if you think back to your last lesson with your students, maybe that was earlier today, I want you to think about who did more of the talking in your last lesson, you or your students. So drop that in the chat. If it's you, you just put me. Um, I'm going to do this as well. So in my last lesson, this is my answer of who was doing most of the talking. I'm going to tell you, oh, I had all these reasons why it was mostly me. But honestly, it's a drift, right? You have to keep conscious of this and start thinking about, okay, well, what am I going to do to stop doing that and actually shift it back to them? And it takes conscious effort and strategic planning to make that happen. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So the first step of that, though, is observing. What do you see? Who's doing it? And finding tiny ways to just flip it on back to them. And you can do that with the guide that I'll drop with for you at the end. So that's the first one. Second one is about shifting accountability. This is all about self-regulation for how do you go from monitoring everything to getting students to be doing that monitoring. The common teacher mistake here is that if I don't check everything, they're not going to do the work and I won't know how they're progressing. And I need to report out on their progressing. So I have to track everything. We chase them down, we remind them, we double check, we over track. I call this like the spiral of death. We keep pedaling harder and faster and harder and faster on that little turbo trainer, but we're not actually moving anywhere because we're still holding all of that. I have colleagues, I observe teachers I work with just measuring every single thing to how many homeworks were done, to every time they do something, I need to measure it. It's not sustainable. And it's one of the reasons why your students aren't stepping up and why you're feeling a bit depleted having to do all that. Why does this happen? Again, it happens because we've been burned before. We've trusted students to take responsibility, to track their own progress, and they didn't. And when they didn't, we tightened our grip, right? We fall back on things that we think are going, well, they're going to work in the moment, but we're not going to be able to do that over time. And we're actually doing our students a disservice. I've seen things like constant reminders, people using grades as threats to get things, to get things moving, pressuring them to do this kind of accountability, and it doesn't work on the long term. And the real consequence of that, not only on them, but it's on ourselves as well. Students will never learn to manage their own time, their own effort, their own emotions, or their own progress if we keep doing it. And then we're stuck in this exhausting loop of chasing and tracking instead of doing the teaching that we actually want to do. So what do we do about that? Well, you want to move from monitoring everything to building self-regulation. Real accountability doesn't come from control. It comes from reflection and feeling a greater sense of ownership over your own learning. And our job is not to check every detail. It's to build systems that let students practice accountability for themselves. I'm going to repeat that because it's so important to hear clearly. We need to be building systems that allow students to practice accountability for themselves. Here's your quick action step. End of class, give them a responsibility reflection. I like to do this. I used to do it on sticky notes. Now I do it electronically because it's faster and my students know how to get right onto that Microsoft form and just fill it out. And then I can go away and look at it more carefully and actually respond to them later. So you're going to ask two questions. What did you take responsibility for today? And if you want to supercharge that, what will I take responsibility for tomorrow? This could be about, this is my favorite part. This could be about learning content. It could be about collaboration. It could be about their behavior in the classroom, how much they focused, or even their use of time. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we're trying to build a habit of self-checking without you having to chase them down. And when you end class this way, you're helping students to practice, if you take it back to the bike ride, practice pedaling on your own. They're not waiting for you to tell them, okay, you've hit the mark now you can move forward. They're naming the effort themselves. That's self-regulation. And I'm going to show you what it looks like in my classroom. I hope you can see this. If you can't, come off mute and I'll show you. The top two examples, I'll give you some time to read them. Top two examples are from my IG2 class. One was on poetry, the other's on goal setting, coming from the same class. And the other two are what they're going to do tomorrow. Like we're going to start reading partnerships next week. And so this was them kind of reflecting on that. So you can see here, these are beautiful. I always love looking at student examples. Today, I took responsibility for making my own twist in interpreting a poem and trusting it. Typically, I end up trusting someone else's ideas rather than my own in the fear of being wrong. However, today I took aspects of someone else's ideas and thoughts through their analysis and added my own, creating my own unique personal view and response to the poem. Beautiful. My IG2s are chasing right now, trying to do personal response. So these are students who know that on their exam they have to have a personal response to the poem, and so they're trying to build that. I'm really pleased they spelled responsibility correctly, actually. The other one is this is from Alex. This is him talking about thinking more critically and outside the box when it came to setting my goals. He realizes that he struggles in parts of the exam paper where other people do much better. He's not sure why. And so you can see him working that through. And then if you look at the bottom left example, this is what they're going to be doing next. So that was that second question. I will be responsible by knowing my book well and being ready to discuss different ideas. I will have had annotated the story and the important moments so that the minimum amount of time is lost looking for events. Look at that. I don't even have to assign homework because this kid knows what he needs to do for the next class. He's taking responsibility of that, right? So those are some really practical examples. Again, feel free to come off mute if you want to interact about that. If you want to ask questions, you're more than welcome to do that, but you can also just sit back and listen and absorb. So those are some examples of responsibility check. I was more pleased with I was surprised by some of those answers, honestly, from my students. I thought they might not get it, but this is the second or third time they've been doing responsibility reflection. So this is just gold. I don't know
I
about you all, but
imagine, is it
yeah, go ahead.
adaptable for a younger class?
I
Because
would imagine this is Marie. Hi, Marie. Yeah,
hi.
I would imagine if you change the language, maybe you don't call it about responsibility, maybe you're more specific, like how did you show that you are working well in partnership today? You could direct it a little bit
Mhm.
more to what you want them to be talking about or change that word responsible. What did I do well
Yeah.
today? But direct them towards where you want it to be, whether it's content, whether it's a specific
Uh-huh.
learning behavior, whether it's a social behavior. This is a good one, especially for kids who struggle to do things like come with their supplies. I took
Uh-huh.
responsibility for having all my pencils ready.
That's a good one.
Like I took responsibility for taking my books out of my backpack and putting them on my desk and being ready
Mm,
for class before the teacher told me to.
yeah, that's a good one.
It's a good one, right? And they can
Yeah.
do it. I just love it. But this is for students. My students here are like 14, 15.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But this is a golden one. I've been using it a lot lately. I don't know. This year is my year for self-regulation. I'm a determined to get it into my class one way or another. So
Mm.
Mm,
Nice. Thank you.
that's the one, sure. Student ownership absolutely works. It works. I know it because I'm a teacher. It's happening in my classroom. It's happening in the classrooms of the teachers that I coach. I want to share a quick story with you, and it's not to impress you, but I think you're going to see yourself in this story. This is about Cheryl, not her real name, but she is a real teacher. I teach with her. I've coached her. She's an experienced teacher with solid practice. Her classes well planned, knows her content, materials strong. She does everything by the book correctly, and she's super passionate about her topic, her subject. She came to me because she was feeling dissatisfied. She wants her students to be more motivated, more curious. Instead, what she was getting was a lot of passivity, students focused on the grades. And then she said to me, even like, I'm teaching, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing, but they're not learning. I can see they're not learning. They're not going in the direction I want them to be. So through some work with me together, she's decided to try something different. She first had to kind of unpack her assumptions about herself, about what was going on in her classroom, about her students. And then she worked on shifting her design of how she was teaching her lessons. She approached ownership using some of the strategies that I was giving to her, but she was choosing the ones that spoke to her. Those always work the best when you pick one that you're like, ooh, I want to try that one out. And that's what it's all about, right? Tinkering, trying, experimenting. She started to become less focused on the product and more focused on the daily process with her students. She started to really lean into giving students more voice and choice, and she was tying what they were doing in class to a bigger purpose and helping students, excuse me, find that for themselves. And the results is that her small changes started to lead to bigger shifts in her classroom. She saw students stepping up more, and this looked like them talking more, deciding more, thinking more. She started to feel lighter, more energized and hopeful, and she felt like she was teaching, not dragging students through a curriculum. And her students really are thriving. It's not perfect. She's moving in the right direction. I checked up with her just a couple weeks ago, and she was like, it's going. I just have to get back in it. I have to keep consciously planning for these moments in my classroom. And she uses the guide to plan. She uses those 4 elements, and everything she does, she's like, where can I do these? Where can I do these? Here's the thing, Cheryl is not unusual. She's experienced, committed, and she's very solid in her practice, just like everyone on this call. But she needed some structure to help her to shift that load. And that's what really made the difference, the structure of her classroom. And here's another piece. She didn't do it alone, right? She had support, space to try, the ways to reflect, and someone to reflect with, and someone to help her keep it going when things started to get messy. And that's true for all of us, right? Like teachers, we don't lack learning. We sit in PD all day long. We absorb it fast. We find a book, we read it, we've got it. But the real challenge, so, it's not, I don't know what to do. It's finding time, space, and support to actually apply it while we're still trying to cover content, deal with behavior issues, keep everything moving in our classroom. And unfortunately, that's where kind of confidence starts to dip, time starts running out, and we try to fix it on our own. I'm pretty sure you're here tonight because you know that there has to be a different way to do things, and you don't want to keep doing this by yourself. It's not sustainable. And it's not just you. This is the number one question that I get from teachers who I've been coaching one-to-one. How do I actually get students to take ownership without, turning into chaos or all projects or losing time from my curriculum or burning out? And it's exactly what led me to jump in and say, well, I need to help teachers to do this. It is possible. So I created the student ownership sprint, and this is not more theory. There's a bit of theory in it, but it's really a space to practice the shifts with support. And I'd love to share with you a little bit about what that looks like. So if you will stick with me, I'll present to you what the student ownership sprint is. And I designed it specifically for this issue. It's a space, like I said, to practice, to tinker and experiment in your own classroom with feedback and community, so you're not carrying it all by yourself. It's a 6-week program built for secondary teachers by a secondary teacher. And inside, we go deep on 3 things. We first shift that cognitive work so that you're teaching less and they're thinking more. We are creating the right conditions for ownership to happen. So students are stepping up. We also address what happens when they start resisting, when they push back on you. How do you handle that? We also make accountability stick. So you are not monitoring and tracking all the progress. And the timing of this really matters. The next sprint that I'm running is going from October 8 to November 12. And that gives you space to test, adjust, and head into winter break more confident. So you're not like crawling to the winter break, to the winter holidays. And the best way to show you, I think, about what that looks like is through the teachers who've already been on the sprint. So these are some testimonials from 2 teachers who were in my sprint in May, June of last term. And you can see here that these are real teachers, real classrooms, small shifts. Sylvanus is a teacher in Kenya. He teaches science. And here's what he had to say. He's a very energetic teacher, and I like how he says that when he started giving students more agency, he really started to see things quickly change in his classroom. And Evine is a teacher here in Switzerland. She teaches Lang Lit, and she was using a strategy that I was teaching called the silent start. You might have seen that on LinkedIn if you follow me. And she was happy with that because she said it really got her students thinking, and that's exactly where she wants them to be, that she felt like that's where they needed to do the most work. Right. And so that's kind of a couple of teachers from my last cohort and how they felt about being in the sprint. Um, if I'm being real with you, well, I am being real with you. Many of my colleagues, the teachers that I talk with in the staff room, the teachers that I coach, they tell me that, you know what, I'm already overwhelmed. I've got all these things to teach. I've got new courses, new kids coming in, and they're like, I don't have the headspace for something new. And for me, the saddest, most heartbreaking thing about that is that I absolutely know what it's going to feel like for them if nothing changes, if they don't do anything different, because that's the space that I was in. If we fast forward 8 to 12 months from now, if nothing changes, if you just do exactly what you're doing, what's that going to feel like? I guarantee you're still going to be reminding students about what to do because you're still the one holding all the thinking. You're still going to be hearing things like, is this for a grade? Because they haven't learned to take that responsibility and know what's what in your classroom. You're still going to be dragging them through every lesson because that weight has not been shifted back to them. That's not on you. That's a structure and a strategy issue, and it is figure outable. You can fix this. You do it through the small shifts that can really make a difference in student ownership. So what happens on the other side of the shifts that you're going to be learning about in the sprint? You're going to leave with clarity about what you should be focusing on, and you're going to have the momentum to make that happen in your classroom. You're going to leave with the confidence heading into the rest of the year. So spring term, you're going to know that you've tested these strategies, you've adjusted them, and you know that they work in your classroom. And most important, you're going to walk into a classroom where your students are carrying more of the weight. So you're going to feel that joy of teaching again, as opposed to that overwhelm and maybe that depletion that has been gnawing at you. That's what I designed the sprint to give you, is all of that. So if this is resonating with you, I'd love to talk to you about your classroom. Drop the word ownership in the chat so I know that you're on the same wavelength as me. While you do that, I'm going to drop a link in the chat for you to book a clarity call with me. I hope I can get this link to work there. Yep. So I'd love to talk to you about that, about your classroom. I hope this, yes, that works. Perfect. That clarity call, if you book a call with me, this is what happens. We talk, it's a little bit under 30 minutes. We talk about what's happening in your classroom right now. What feels heavy for you, where you want to go with your class, like what is the vision you have for that dream class. We're going to look at where your students might be ready to step in, because they're probably already, there are moments in your room where they're ready to go and they're ready to step in, and maybe places where you could step back. And whether you join the sprint or not, you're going to leave with a clearer picture of what your next steps are. And I will be honest with you, if I don't think the sprint is for you, you know, that's perfectly fine. It's not for everybody. Not everyone's ready to do that kind of work. But you'll definitely leave with a clearer picture. And I love talking to teachers about the classroom and what's happening. So before we close today, I'm letting you out, I think, a little bit early. And before we close today, I want you to take a moment and just think about the things that I've been sharing with you today. And I want you to drop into the chat your MVP. So what's the most valuable thing that you're taking out of this workshop today? Maybe it's tracking student thinking. Maybe it's the responsibility reflection. Maybe it's that fresh way of looking at ownership through the guide, you know, through that metaphor. I find that when I name that thing, I'm more likely to use it tomorrow. So whatever it is, drop it in the chat right now. What's resonating for you of the things that we were talking about? While you're doing that, I'm going to drop to you what I promised. Let me first end this show. There we are, full screen. Thanks. Thanks for joining. Great. I'm going to drop the in-class ownership check for you. And if you want to catch it later, just send me a DM or a message and I'll let you have that. But here is the tool that I said I would drop for you. And this is the one where you observe your class. And as soon as you see that you're doing more of the talking, you can shift it back. So I'm giving you strategies to do right in the moment without having to plan. So that's for you. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Marie, for joining. Thank you, Priyamvada. I hope you feel better. Thanks everyone for joining and hope to talk to you soon.